And we're going to talk about layouts today and about getting out of some ruts that I feel like we're in when it comes to layouts. Namely, this rut. I've been trying to come up with a name for this, like to give it a name, like it's the I-beam layout. So I'm going to call it that. If you come up with a better name, will you tell me? Because I think we need to name this so that we can start shaming it a little bit. And because we see it a lot. And these are different, completely different sites in different industries. Oh, look, it's on iPad. And yet it's the same, we get the same kind of layout going on. We've had this for a while now. And here we've got two professional graphic design, a blog and a professional association, and they have the exact same, I mean, they don't say, hey, we're professional graphic designers. We kick ass at this. They look the same, right? So, oh, wait, I'm sorry. There is some variation. I shouldn't. But the things haven't always been this way. They became this way, and I'm like, okay, where did this really come from? And it came from the days of the blog. If my memory serves me right, we were around the time of this, when all the monitors were 640 pixels wide, yes, 640 pixels wide, and suddenly we could have 800 pixels wide, and we had this extra space, and people said, hey, let's put some useful stuff in that space. And for a long time, this was actually really useful. We looked at the things in the sidebar. And then this happened, where we've trained people over the last decade to never look in the sidebar. Don't look in the sidebar and don't look in the header. There's nothing good there. Just keep your eyes away. Don't even. So I don't know why we keep using this, even though in some ways it's sort of useless. If you want to hide some content from your users, put it in the sidebar. And if you look at the page, it's an empty canvas. We can do anything we want with this. It's dynamic. It's got a z-axis. You can make things move on and off. Actually, this is our dynamic canvas. We've got all this different stuff going on. There's really not, I'm like, why are we always doing that same thing? And there has been, in the last several years, there's definitely been innovation and changes. Responsive has made us adjust and adapt. Although a lot of what we're doing is adjusting and adapting that same I-beam layout into kind of a responsive format. These are both very beautiful, these kinds of layouts, and also, if we only make these layouts, they're going to be constraining. I have started to see another pattern, or we all have, where a lot of this medium pencil and BlendConf, where lots of centering things in sort of an hourglass back and forth. So I drew this shape as this kind of a thing. Lots of times there's a big band of color, and then we break everything into even width, like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 1/2, 1/2. So we kind of are in now a pattern of sort of you do this or you do that. But there was a time when we had a completely different pattern, when we weren't doing any of these. Does anybody remember this? Where did this go? Or this design pattern for layout? This is the original design pattern for layout when you couldn't do any layout. The original, for those of you who are younger, the original web had no layout, as we might think of it. It was this. These are from the Computer Museum in Silicon Valley, because I can't get these. I just stood there with my camera taking pictures of their museum installation. And then this pattern, Space Jam, right? Microsoft.com. This is the original Microsoft.com, and they just put this back up online. The folks over at Paravel worked with Microsoft to recreate it from scratch. A lot of this, 1-800-Flowers. And for those of you who might assume that that's just a graphic, that's not just a graphic. There's buttons. You can click on the buttons. You can enter the garden. Or you can shop the store. Hall of Shame, an arc, an actual round object on a website. Again, another round object with, this is the navigation, mystery meet navigation. This is not all amazing. There's good things that went away and do not bring those things back. But each of those things, those objects like the door, you click it and you go someplace. You go to a web page, or this couch, the plant, the boombox, the lamp. You don't know where you're going, but you click on them and you discover where you're going. A lot of websites had this kind of layout, a bit random, but columns, but just placing things on the page saying, hey, we got some stuff, let's put it on the page. The beginning, things in boxes. People did use boxes. Here's another museum website, and I realized actually this is kind of the kinds of things that we're going back to. Those are the same shapes, very different quality of screens, but the same kind of shapes. Random chaos layout. I really like this one. It's got columns of stuff, but the height of the columns start at different places. Like, whoa, how revolutionary. And this is something that you could do. I'm going to show you technology, and this is something that you could actually easily do with, say, Flexbox, that you couldn't have done 4 years ago or 2 years ago. So why did some of those designs go away, those circles and those buttons kind of laying around? And it's because of the technology that we were using at the time to create those layouts. For those of you who didn't suffer through these days, we were using tables to create layouts. This is actually a data table in this book from, I think, 93, the proper use of a table, but we were using them like this. This is a BBC website from 1997. And I'm hacking into it to show you all the borders on all the tables are set to 0 so that they're invisible, but I'm going in with the web inspector and changing them all to 1 to kind of reveal those the tables so you can see them. And there's actually 4 nested tables, one nested inside another, nested inside another. And you can see, like, oh, that's how they got that layout, is they put everything into one of these cells, and they could kind of put them wherever they wanted, and you just made more boxes and more boxes in order to get things where you wanted them to be. Space Jam with the table cells showing, and you can see how that circular pattern was accomplished. All of that was really the infancy of the web and the infancy of graphic design on the web. We're a baby industry. Even 20, 25 years in, we're still just getting started. But graphic design itself has a much longer legacy, and there's a lot of rich, deep understanding of how to put content onto a page that we can tap into. And I feel like the web has really gotten to a place where we're mature enough that it's time to start doing those kinds of things. So I want to talk a bit about these folks. That is Anna Wintour. She is one of the most powerful people in the fashion industry, if not the most powerful person in the fashion industry. She's the editor-in-chief of American Vogue and has been for a very long time, and runs Vogue. And Vogue puts out amazing, beautiful, I've never been much of a fashion person, but recently I've been looking at, especially Vogue, and it's incredible, beautiful work, absolutely beautiful. And so this is the kind of a magazine spread that they'll put into their magazine. Just a little box of text up in the corner, gorgeous photography, right? Here's the opening of an article or the opening of a series of images, a set of photos with layout. You can see the content laid out on top of the images. And there's this documentary about Anna Wintour and about the making of Vogue called The September Issue, and it's really all about making the September issue of Vogue, which is their biggest issue of the year, and all the work that goes into it. You watch this whole movie, and the whole time you're following them around and watching them work, and what they're doing is going in and out of this room putting the magazine together. So they have an idea, they go pull a bunch of clothes, they do a big fashion shoot, they develop the photos, what year is it, develop the photos? They take the photos, they go to the graphic design department, they put the whole thing together, they come up with these spreads, they make tiny miniature copies of them, and they put them on this wall, and then they stand there and discuss them. And then they rip them down, and they rip this stuff out, and they go get more, and they put the new ideas up on the wall, and they rearrange the pages, and then they look at the wall again. And they're assembling the magazine by looking at the layout, the way it's going to be presented to the reader, the user, and they're thinking print the whole time. They're thinking about the content. They're thinking about the fashion, the clothes, which fashion designer do they want to promote? What tone do they want to set? What is the fall, spring 2015 going to be? But they're doing that through layout, in a way, through the implementation of this as a magazine. Well, okay, where do you think I'm going to go next? And then they take that, and I don't know, they send it to the web people. And the web people put some of it on the website, like this. This is a Vogue magazine website. Or, okay, this is the page, the central page for the magazine. Like if you want to go see Vogue.com magazine, or at least back in June, I think they've redesigned since I made this slide, but that's Vogue. So let's look right here, like there's a bear right there and a woman. Let's click on that. That looks interesting. Okay. All right, let's pretend that stuff at the top isn't there, and we'll just pretend, right? Okay, so this is the article, right? There's bam, bam. And okay, sidebar, header, problem. Okay, let's just look at the article itself. They've got the title, a bunch of share links, because this is so awesome, you're going to want to share it. An image that's really small. See the slideshow, very hidden, very tiny text. They got one sentence here that I would read to you, but none of us can actually read it right now. And then these two sentences that are actually trying to get you to leave and go someplace completely different. And I click on the see the slideshow, and I end up here. I click on the image again, and I end up here. I want to see it big. It's the most beautiful device ever. It's got RGB light coming out of it into your eyeballs. And it looks like that. And I'm like, where is this gorgeous thing that they've spent 100 years figuring out how to get onto a magazine page and have you hold? It's not translating, right? It's not coming over. These people are the best in the world at the top of their careers, and their work is being presented like that. And in some ways, there's a lot of reasons, and a lot of them are people reasons and business structure reasons, and I'm just going to pretend that that's not true for a moment. But talking about and thinking about layout, it's also because somewhere along the line, somebody said, this is what a web page is. This is what a website is. This is a website, and so this is our content. And it's not just Vogue, of course, it's the whole internet, right? We see this everywhere. This is a set of images that Marilyn Mann put together called noise-to-noise ratio, where the white here is the content that you might have ended up on this page to see, and all of this is everything else. And it would be easy to blame this on advertising and say, well, of course the problem is advertising. And advertising can be a problem, and it's very complicated. But if I go back to thinking about the magazine, Vogue, or this is a different fashion magazine, but the same idea applies, the ads are awesome. This year's September issue of Vogue is 856 pages. Probably the majority of those pages are ads, and people are buying that magazine knowing that it's mostly ads, and they love it. You can't really tell the difference on a quick glance of which of these are the editorial pages and which of these are the ad pages. All of it has value for people. So I don't think it's just the ads, and I already said this, but it is the people problem. But I feel like it's our job as designers, as developers, as people who are involved in this, to really help everyone figure out a way to truly present the content at hand and to be much more inventive with our layouts. And so thinking today, like, okay, let's look at some more interesting layouts and let's figure out how to do those in CSS. What's possible? And I want to take some of my inspiration, our inspiration, from magazines themselves. And I'm looking not so much at necessarily the mainstream modern magazines, but experimental magazines from like the 70s and the 60s when people were completely weird in New York and did awesome stuff. it's just shapes wrapped around graphic elements, in this case, letters. Or this one where it's about a dress and picking the right clothes to go with the dress, and so the content, the images, the text has been shaped to be the dress, right? Here's a layout that's a bit more approachable, a bit more modern. Like, wow, look at that text wrapping around her elbow. Fancy. I wonder if we can do that on the web. Guess what? You can do that on the web now, as of now. So here's, I'm working on a website. I have a podcast called the Web Ahead. I'm making a website right now for it. This is totally in progress, completely still rough. I don't know if I like this typography or not. I haven't done the spacing or the hierarchy yet, but I have this idea. So let's check it out. I'm just going to start with floating that image left and put a margin around it. This will be our fallback, our progressive enhancement for browsers that aren't able to do what I'm about to show you. They will get this. This is lovely. This is not amazing. It's fine. This is how you can let a lot of the browsers that are a little bit behind be okay and not freak out, when instead we do this. We can wrap text around a shape using the new CSS Shapes specification. And the code that you write is shape-outside : circle. And you get this. It's a CSS Shapes level 1. There's a level 2 that will also do other cool stuff that I don't have time to talk about today. That will come later. But for now, we can use this. Chrome shipped last week. Chrome 37 shipped support last week. And iOS 8 will have support for it as well, and it ships next week. So, go. There are other things, other properties that you can use: ellipse, border box, inset, a URL. There's also a shape margin, 30 pixels. I'm going to show you these next, a few of them really quickly. Here's shape ellipse. Instead of putting shape outside circle, I put shape outside ellipse. This image is a taller image. Both of these images, I happen to crop them in Drupal and in Photoshop to be ovals. So this code doesn't make the oval, but this code makes the text wrap around the oval. Here is another example using border box. So here I have this one. I have gone ahead and taken this image and rounded the corners using border radius 100 so that the text is still square because this is old school CSS. Border radius makes our square kitten into having rounded corners. And then I add shape outside border box, and then it's going to follow the border radius that was there, and a shape margin to make a little bit of space as well. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you don't have to write all this stuff down. I'll tell you in a second where you can get it. Polygon. This is a polygon shape. It's actually a diamond right now. There's a diamond shape being made. And I happen to pick a kitten whose tail fits really nicely inside that diamond. But let's say we want to make it more complex. Just last week, also, Razvan Kaliman at Adobe created a Chrome extension that you can get. It's free. You download it. You put it into Chrome, the CSS Shapes editor, and it does this. So I can inspect this element. I'm in Chrome. I'm using this tool. You come down. So I've clicked on the image there. There's right here, there's this tiny little arrow, and there's a little pull-down menu, and I can go to Shapes and activate this tool and click on that little tiny arrow. And now, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a blue line. That diamond is outlined in blue, and I can click it and make a point and drag the point. I can drag the points that are there. And as they move around, the CSS, oops, oh, now I messed it up. But the CSS, the CSS that is written, all those polygon numbers, the percents, and all this kind of crazy math, you don't have to go out into another program and figure it out and come back in and go back and forth and all this crazy stuff. You can just go straight into Chrome and edit it in line and then grab that code, copy it, and go paste it into your code editor. Or if you're doing fancier things with Chrome Dem tools, then you know how to get that in there stuff. But it's really quite remarkable. So you can end up with something that's much more complicated. There's also Another way to do this, here we are on CodePen, which, by the way, CodePen, go there. So this, right, the way the text is around those B's, we could do that with a polygon. We also can do that. Here's the image itself that's on the page. But then there's a second place over here in the CSS, and I'm sorry that the screen is so small, but where it says shape outside URL, and I'm pointing to, the people who made this are pointing to a mask that they made. So you make a mask image, and then the browser will automatically figure out where to put the text around that mask, and not put any text on top of the black, put the text where the white is. Good to go. Really cool stuff. So this stuff, all of these examples that I'm showing you are in a GitHub repo, all the kittens. The kitten examples, the examples that I made are in a GitHub repo right now at JenSimmons.com. The layout's ahead, where you can look at my code and rip my CSS apart, steal it, and clone it, and fork it, and mess around with it yourself. You can also look at this stuff. It's up right now at labs.thewebahead.net, and check that out. And I'm going to put these slides online today, if I can find internet, or very soon if I don't. And if you just follow me, my name is JenSimmons. Follow JenSimmons on Twitter. If you didn't write anything else down, just write this down. Go follow me. Ping me if you miss it, but I'll tweet out the link to the slides. The slides have those two links to URLs to GitHub and to the demo and all that kind of stuff. Also, so I haven't picked myself, but there's a podcast, The Web Ahead. I do this every week. Sarah Swaydown was just on the show, and she's done a lot of work around CSS Shapes, or really a lot of work around teaching CSS Shapes. She's written several blog posts that are really amazing. We talked for over an hour about CSS Shapes and about some other things, regions included. And on the page for this episode of the podcast, there's links, and I just go to all of them if you want to learn more about CSS Shapes. Like the links to the B demo on CodePen are in here. The links, like all the great links to all the best articles right now about CSS Shapes are in this show notes for this episode. So it's another place you can grab a lot more information. You can follow up and figure out more details about how that code works. So let's look at a few more magazines, and then we'll look at some more technology about how we might accomplish some of these things. Look, they put text on the side, it's going up and down, like on its side. Here, these are a little bit crooked to give it that kind of hand-cut feeling. This is crazy. This would probably only really work if you can hold the thing. So it works in a magazine. It would work on an iPad. It's not going to work if somebody has to sit at their desk and go like this. But there's still ideas here that you can kind of just see what this feels like if you're a designer and see what you might want to do with something like this. Here's another. And you can do this in CSS. Transform, rotate. We'll just turn the thing. Transforms get talked a lot about with animation and doing CSS animations, but you can also use them without animating anything, just to make it be a little bit different. Here's another one where the headline, I rotated it 90 degrees, minus 90 degrees, to make it go sideways down the page. Here's another one where I combine, rotate, and shapes. Really radical. Starts to get into a little bit of what some of those magazines were doing. Kind of crazy polygon. I did that using the Chrome extension. Rotated it negative 45 degrees. Transform, rotate. Really simple. Totally usable today. Look at that. Look at all that green. There's a few flags, so there's some things you might want to look at. Most of those don't have to do with transform, rotate. They have to do with other parts of the transformation specification. But there's really great support. Back to IE9. Here's some other layouts. This layout, I'm really thinking more about stuff like, those are in the middle of the page. I think this is really beautiful. It'd be more beautiful if the screen were bigger. But it relies very heavily on the edges of the piece of paper and on being able to position things in relationship to the edges of the paper, which is something that mostly we say, hey, that's not what the web is about. Stop thinking about the edges. But I'm beginning to change my mind on that a little bit and wonder maybe we were too quick to say that. Maybe there's something there to explore. This is a very simple layout, really beautiful. So let's see if we can do this in CSS, something like this. So here I'm going to do an example. Very simple. There's a main element that wraps the whole thing. There's an image. I've got a headline and a paragraph, this headline and this paragraph, and I wrap those two in a div, right? So I just needed a div to go around this stuff on this side. Here's my CSS. So I floated the image left, put a margin on the image to the right, and made the image be 50% of the width of the viewport, and put some padding around the div just to get all of this content away from the edges of that div container. Really simple, right? Let's see what it looks like, in case you forgot. Oh, right, the only reason that it looked nice is because I put the browser window very specifically at the edge of the bottom of the photo. What happens if the window is bigger or smaller? This is how the web works, right? How it's worked up till now. We're cutting our face off. It's not great. So this is why we we sort of stay away from those kind of layouts. But now I'm going to, instead of saying I want the image to be 50% of the width of the container that it's in, I'm going to comment that line out and make it be 100 VH. VH stands for viewport height, and it stands for viewport height, not the height of the thing that it's in, not the height of the container, the div, or the position relative element that it's in, but the height of the actual web window, the window itself, no matter what else is going on inside that window. And this is what happens instead. The image is growing and shrinking with the window, and no matter what I do, that image is staying 100 VH, 100% of the viewport height. And it's keeping its aspect ratio because I did not set a width on it. So the height is fixed, and the width is just going for a ride, and it's keeping the aspect ratio. Let's change it again a little bit, and I'm going to put a width of VW, 50 VW on it. So I'm saying I want the width of the photo to be 50% of the viewport width. So I want you to be 100% of the height and 50% of the width. I want you to stay that way the whole time. And I'm also going to toss a viewport width unit onto the H1. So the name Grace Hopper is going to be 6 VWs. Instead of being pixels or percents or Ms or rems, I'm not saying 36 pixel font. I'm saying 6 VW sized font, please. And this is what happens. The picture no longer stays aspect ratio constrained, right? It doesn't really work for a picture of a human, but it might work for something else. But even more exciting, profound to me, is that Grace Hopper keeps growing and shrinking with the window. And there's no JavaScript involved. This is no JavaScript here. This is just, you can set units to be in relationship to the size of the window itself. Here's another example. All of those circles are navigation elements. This is just a complete experiment that I did last year. And I have a bunch of media queries. So they're jumping in size and they're moving around based on some media queries just to make this responsive. But the text animate and the actual circles, everything about the layout is done in viewport units, either VW or VH, the whole layout. And it was on this project sort of messing around that I was like, wow, this really changes the way that I think about what might be possible. It's called Viewport Units if you want to look stuff up, Viewport Units. And basically, the deal is any place that you might use pixels, rem, percents as a unit, you can instead use VH, VW, Vmin, and Vmax. Vmin will give you, it will look at the width and it will look at the height, and it will just give you whichever one's smaller, and Vmax will look at them and give you whichever one is bigger. So you might, and they're a little buggier. The implementation of those is a little bit buggier, so you might have to be a little bit careful. But But the VH and VW are solid, and they work in all of these browsers. The lighter green partial support has to do with the Vmax and Vmin not being quite on spec. A few of the browsers sort of did it in a little bit different way. But basically it works, the VH and VW work everywhere except IE8 and Upper Mini. The Upper Mini doesn't, nothing works in Upper Mini, so. Well, in Android, the new IE. 4.1, 4.3. So, how much time do I have? Oh yeah, we're good. Columns. You think about magazines, you think about columns of text. Here's an older page. Here's a crazy page. It's got columns. This is a more beautiful kind of layout. It works because of those columns on the bottom. So what can we do about columns? There is a specification called multi-column layout that I think doesn't get nearly enough attention. So let me show it to you. Here's no columns, right? We know what this is. This is just text getting way too long. The line length of that line of text is very long and it's unreadable. This is a flexible layout, a la, whatever, 1997. Here's a typical responsive web design where we peg the width to be fixed at a certain viewport to keep the line of text from being too long. And we've centered it because we're just not being very creative. And cool, awesome, media queries are awesome, but what about columns? Can we do something like that? So here I've got, here's the code for what you just saw, right? Article max width 500 pixels. This doesn't even have a media query on it, but you get the idea. I'm going to take that out. I'm going to take out this max width 500 pix, and I'm going to take out that margin that I had on there. And I'm going to instead put on the article column count 2 and column gap 2m. And this is the result. So we get 2 columns. The space between them is 2m. And as I change the shape of the width of the window, I always have 2 columns, and they grow and shrink as we go along. Kind of cool. But hey, what about I want them to have more columns and fewer columns at different points? Does that mean I need to go and write a whole bunch of media queries and change the column count? No. Because what you can do instead is use column width. So I've commented out column count 2, and I've put in column width 200 pixels. And basically what I'm saying to the browser is, I would like you to make a column that's around 200 pixels wide. Do your best. And what it does is it says, okay, well, at this point, I'm going to make 2 columns. Oh, look, now I think I'm going to make it into 1 column, because 1 column is going to be closer to 200 pixels. Now, okay, let's go up to 3 columns, because 3 columns is going to give us closer to 200 pixels, and up to 4. So there's no media queries here. The content's just flowing from column to column. The columns are growing and shrinking in size because of this very simple code. Here's a little bit more complex. I put the title itself inside the columns, inside the element that's got the column CSS on it. I put a column rule. You can put a column rule down the middle. And I tossed an image in here so you can see how images get handled as well at different widths of the viewport, different sizes of the screen. It's kind of very interesting to me. Here's the code for that. Column rule, and then you write it much like you would write a border property. And the support is really quite good for multi-column layout. It's been around really kind of longest. And now, of course, the problem is that if you want to have a long article, like I want to have a full-length article that was in a newspaper, and I want columns, you can't just have 2 columns running down a web page that's this big on a device that's this big, because then people are like reading and they're scrolling down. They get to the bottom of the first column, they got to like scroll back up to the top and like read, right? So it's not amazing. It's like, this is cool. I wish it were a little more powerful. They actually are working on some more things to add to it, but they're not out yet. That's why a lot of this is that lighter green color. And maybe it's really great for short text, snips of short text. Or maybe it's really great for things that isn't text, like a bunch of images or a bunch of boxes of something else. Or something else to just throw into the mix to use along with everything else that we have. So Flexbox, yeah, I'm going to have to go fast. I don't have a lot of time to show you Flexbox. Flexbox, there's a lot of news out there about it. One of my favorite things about this, have you ever gotten a PSD from a designer where like magically all the content's exactly the same height? Because they have the same 2 sentences of lorem ipsum in every box. And you're like, could you please learn what the web is? The content's not, right? I would go back and be like, oh my God, can we have a meeting? Frustrated. Yeah, you don't have to be frustrated anymore, because guess what? It's okay now. It's totally okay. These boxes are not the same height as each other. The content's not, look at that. This content's short, this content's tall. Look at this gray box with a drop shadow. Look, they're the same height as each other. Look. And this, I coded this page for Google, the Chrome developer website, last fall, and it was just such a joy, because the designers were not that smart, and it was fine. It was just groovy. And each row is like a different height as the rows below it. It's nice. It's really, yeah. So I highly recommend Chris Coyer's CSS Tricks Complete Guide to Flexbox. Go read that. It takes you couple hours to input into your brain, and when you're done with that, you'll be like, he's got all these diagrams showing you sort of which is which, and like, look at that one. What? You can like have columns of stuff where they center next to each other, like vertically. Oh, yeah. Or here, where the baseline of the text lines up, and the boxes just go. Yeah. Totally supported. Firefox finally, with I think it was Firefox 29 came out, 28 came out, and supported the last piece of Flexbox that we needed to do sort of crazy full-page layouts. So you can really go to town with this. I mean, of course, if you've got to do IE9 or something, then you need to have some sort of fallback progressive enhancement layout for that. But you can handle that. Yeah. Regions, a PageMaker. So back to the problem of the long columns of text. This is the kind of thing that you would really like to have to be able to fix that problem. If you've never used PageMaker, QuarkXPress, or InDesign, basically what you do is you draw boxes, and then you pour text into it. Like the icon for the action was like a little bucket. You pour your text into and it flows. And then if you change the font, and the font's a little smaller, or you change it from 12 point to 14 point or something, and the text grows, then or you delete a paragraph, it just reflows, and you're not having to like adjust each and every box separately the way you would if you were trying to lay out a magazine, say, in Illustrator. Would we like that on the web? Yes. Adobe especially would really like this on the web. Adobe especially wants this. Their clients want this on the web. But it's not on the web. And the thing that's a little scary, the red doesn't scare me, it's this that scares me. See up here, this green flag? That means Chrome put it into Chrome behind a flag, which means only people who are cool and experimental knew how to turn it on, but it was there, and you could test it, and then there's no flags. They took it out. Chrome status no longer pursuing. This happened. CSS regions considered harmful on the list apart, written by, I don't know, the guy who invented CSS. Hakim Lee. And he's right. Actually, what he says, and I think. And then here's Google. I still don't understand this email explaining why they took it out. I have like 4 different ideas about what this really means, and I don't know which one's right. Here, Sarah Swaydown wrote an article about why CSS regions matter, advocating for them, and she wrote an article about how to use them on the same day, and then she wrote this article in response to that article. And if you're interested, you can go read all that stuff. You also can listen to, the web ahead. The same episode, actually, that she was on, 81, is we talk about regions, and we talk about the debate and what's going on. So I don't know that regions are going to happen. It may never happen, but there are a couple other specs that people are advocating for as an alternative to regions, and hopefully something like that will show up at some point. Grid is another one. I have no time to talk about this, so I'm going to say grid is another one. People are super excited about it. It's not quite supported yet. It's in Chrome behind a flag. And look, it's supported in IE10. So if you only support IE10, you're good to go. 10 and 11. I mean, this is remarkable that Microsoft is actually like in front of stuff sometimes. So good for you. Right now, you know who's really dragging their heels all the time? Firefox. Open bug tickets. That's what I did with Flexbox. I opened a bug ticket. I'm like, come on. And they were like, okay. Yeah, and there's other stuff going on. So what does that red mean, red clipboard? I got 5 minutes left. So one thing I want to say, thinking about magazine layouts, is that you definitely want to translate this stuff from print, from these other places, from the legacy of graphic design. You don't want to transfer it. Those other things are pages, they're books. They turn. We have a long, scrolly thing. And we have lots of different size screens. So definitely figure out ways to sort of translate these things. But my hope, really, is that we let this go as the assumption. We don't necessarily say, oh, this is how we have to do things. That we have all these other things. I do want to leave you with one last story. Bill Cunningham is a fashion photographer. He works for the New York Times. He's this amazing, really sweet guy, total gem, and you might know him from his series on the NewYorkTimes.com website, On the Street. There's also a documentary about him that's just a joy to watch.
I would come after my job at the Times, and we would lay this out, and then I'd go home about 2 o'clock. Bike back from Soho, where we were.
I think one Details magazine, it was fall special, 125 pages of Bill Cunningham.
100 pages?
99
pages. We never thought of it. We just went on and did what we wanted till we had said what we wanted to say.
111 pages.
111 pages. Here, what I did was I blew up the embroidery of the coat, and we put it on the pages, and then put the coat small in the middle of it. Because the news was in...
Yeah, the idea was this.
Because it was like something out of the Renaissance, you see? You try to show the reader what was really new. Look at this. It's like something from Paul Poiret, 1910, the Scheherazade, the Arabian Nights. Look at the embroidery, the tassels, the lace. Now, I mean, do you imagine the extravagance of these pages? And Annie Flanders never blinked. You can't say anything, Annie. I didn't take money, so I can do what I want. And I wonder she didn't say, that didn't mean you can bankrupt me.
It just reminds me, this clip, it reminds me of the rich legacy that we're coming from and what it is that we're really building on. And his excitement about the layout being a way to really display, that they figured out a layout that would best display the content that they had at hand. And that's what I want all of us to go off and do, is sort of figure out new ways to use this technology to really make our content shine. So thank you.